So today I wanted to talk about fear. I'm afraid that we just heard a noise in the building, so I'm afraid that we're being robbed. No. Um, as you plan the sermon, you try to check in with people, what's going on in your life and what's thing. And there's been sort of I would say a theme with people lately of fear. So I planned the sermon much further out than the exact week. But as it was getting closer to the time, I was like, okay, this is something I'm hearing from a lot of people here in DC. Um, I know that a couple of our members had like an assault in their building. Another case, there was some crime. A number of people were stressed out because we have National Guard and ICE troops in the streets. Other people were stressed out. Are we moving from a democracy to an authoritarian government? So then people are stressed out about their jobs or not having jobs. So there's just sort of a general flow of people being afraid. So I thought, okay, maybe I could talk about that topic. That would be relevant. And then as the week came uh, closer to Sunday, we had this assassination of Charlie Kirk at Utah Valley University. And I think the fear just even went up more. Um, Politicians are canceling public events, and I think a variety of communities are just bracing for reprisals or reactions. And uh, and now there's a gay trans angle to the story, or there has been, and that's added another layer of division. And something that I had to get involved with as well, beyond just DC. Now, a lot of you know that I've been doing this training and how to, bridge divides. And it's interesting. I haven't had a lot of success in either red states, getting it going, starting it, or in a lot of colleges have not been interested. But government and the White House is doing it and so forth. The Navy's interested, business is interested. So I was really thrilled that Utah was interested because the group working with me there is Equality Utah, a gay and lesbian group. And I thought this is a red state. And also they have a college campus program. So they wanted to do it on college campuses. And so we were doing the train the trainer model just last week and with the college students. And guess where some of them were from? This exact college. And the group is a gay and lesbian group in Utah. So the fear of some of the concerns of DC, I was like, now is multiplied. And I was on the phone pretty constantly this week with Equality Utah, trying to brainstorm how I could be helpful and what message do you say and what do you say to your members? And there's lots of misinformation. So the fear factor was very alive as I was writing the sermon. In my own life, I was very fearful for the people who were involved in the program there in Utah, and just the general sense of fear. So I thought, okay, this was definitely the right topic. Let's think about how we can deal with it and how we can deal with it from a spiritual perspective. The way I thought about it was, what have I done in my own life to deal with fear? And what came back to me was a very dramatic moment in my life, which I've mentioned in other sermons, but I'll just mention now, which was when I was about 25. I had a recurring dream of a tiger chasing me. And so much so that I would wake up completely in a cold sweat. And I could never quite see it. I could hear it, and I just, wake up. And I realized this was a metaphor for my fears at the time. I had just come out of the closet. That didn't go very well. So I didn't see like a future for myself. And I was right in the middle of an AIDS crisis where I'm looking at the obituaries and I'm seeing all these people dying. So my fear was, I'm not going to have the life that I thought I was going to have, and I'm going to die. And so I keep waking up and my heart is pounding through all that. And yet, what I also remember paradoxically in that moment was I did have a sense that there was a peace that passes all understanding, that I was loved by God, and I had that for myself. So that was very grounding. But the dreams were really very upsetting. And as I looked to scripture, I saw that even Jesus had fears. We read about them today, but that story in Luke where Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane and he's about to face his execution, it says that the sweat on him literally turns to blood. He's so anxious and he's seeking a way out. So Jesus is facing fear, and it is part of the human experience, as we will all face it. And what I've also kind of discovered is that fear can have a positive effect, and it can also have a debilitating effect. It can lead us to be so stressed out that we can't do anything, and it can actually have a physical effect on our body, or it can be a game changer in our lives. And in the in that time when I was wrestling with my own fears, a message came to me, a voice, an angel. I don't know what it was, but it says the only way you are going to overcome your fear is to face it. So I decided, okay, what can I do to face my fears right now? So that's when I volunteered to become an AIDS buddy, which meant you visited a person living with AIDS each week. And I was very afraid. I was very, because I didn't know, like, could you get it from a drink of water? Could you get it from touching? Could you get it from, it was very early stage. So I just went into the thing, and it turned out to be a game-changing decision. And then when I went to sleep after doing that, I saw the tiger again, and it just turned and walked away. So by facing it, I just turned and faced it, and it walked away. And for me, this metaphor was very powerful, and it really impacted my whole life. When we have fears, we have to face them. We've got to turn into them and not keep running from them. So that all sounds fine and good. How do we do that? What do we do with our fears? Well, for me, Swedenborg's insights have been very helpful because he describes two types of fears. One is our base fear of our ego, being right, being in control, and losing control, losing our narrative, the way we want things. And that's a fear that we have. And he calls that lower fear. Today, we might call that anxiety. And we all have it. But the lower fear can be quite debilitating. And what it has a power to do is take us down rabbit holes. It'll say, well, if this happens. And if you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And then you're going to do this. And very often with my coaching clients, I'd say, tell me what's going to happen if, with your fear. And invariably, people would talk about living under a bridge, because they lose their job, they lose reputation, they lose their family, they lose everything. And then they'd be, completely lost. So it's just this fear that can be quite consuming. And one of the impacts of it is that it produces not just anxiety, but can also produce anger and contempt. Usually it leads us to blame other people. So we're they, them, over there, the people that I disagree with, or the people who've ruined my life, or whatever it is. But it's very externally focused and very frustrated. I'm not in control because it challenges my view that I see the facts, I see the world as it really is, everyone else is wrong. So that's the lower fear. And that's the one that we don't want to get stuck in, what we all go through. So what's the higher fear? The higher fear is what he calls holy reverence. And that's a fear where you take the fear and it produces something positive. You shift it to something good and true. And there are fears of doing harm. There's a fear of losing people that you love. There's a fear of losing your connection with the divine. So these would be the higher fears, and they usually will produce in us humility, more courage, more compassion. So we can see there's a real difference in the two types of fears. One is interior focused. I'm going to be a better person. I'm going to be more compassionate. But the other is externally focused and blames and has contempt and is pointing at others. And so going back to me at that age, I would say my lower fear was, well, I'm going to die young. I'm not going to have a career, which is what everybody told me. I'm going to lose everything. So that very much anxiety producing. And guess what? None of that was true. But that's very often how these anxiety fears work. But I shifted, and it was largely through that, experience that God loved me, that it shifted to the higher one. It was, what can I do now in this crisis? How can I help somebody else? What can we do to address this? So it's the same situation, but two radically different ways of approaching it, two reactions. So I've noticed in the after this aftermath of this assassination of this conservative speaker, Charlie Kirk, that the internet, which I've had to check particularly because of my work with Utah, is full of lower fear. It's people rushing. I mean, rushing to score political points on a daily basis. So whatever the news is, everybody comes in and says, this is what caused it, and this is why, and here's the bad guys, and we have to blame them. And then the news changes, and then it's like, no, the other side will. And so it's going back and forth, and people are very anxious to make sure that they're right, the other side is wrong. People are saying that people aren't sad enough, or then other people are saying I'm not sad at all. And this is all playing out on people have a desire to share this on social media and tell others how they're thinking. This lower fear has a very negative effect on us. It actually leads to dehumanization, and it actually leads to political violence, which if we dwell in this lower fear, this anxiety state, we will just have reprisals and we'll be in a period of political violence. And then there's other people who are looking at it from a higher fear, and they're saying, this is a sad situation. Let's pray for this guy and his family and his two children, but let's refuse to make it an opportunity for political ammunition. So again, same situation, two fears, and one which isolates and divides us, and the other which connects and heals. I thought that the governor of Utah, Spencer Cox, has been a good model of higher fear. And here's a quote from him this week. We can return violence with violence. We can return hate with hate. But at some point, we have to find an off ramp, or it's going to get much worse. And then he says to younger people, your generation has an opportunity to build a culture that is very different than the one we're suffering through right now. So I thought that was an example of higher fear and trying to, and particularly hard for politicians who generally engage at the lower fear level, stepping up. So what can we do in our own lives when we're stuck in that lower fear level, when we're facing a situation and we're just completely stuck with anxiety? I came up with 5 steps that I looked back on my own life, and maybe these would be helpful to you. I'll share them, and maybe you have other strategies. But the first one is, one second. The first one is what I told you in my own life story, which is stepping into asking for God's help. So asking for God's help. I don't think we can do this without the Lord's help in these cases. I had to get divine support. I was reminded, and I remind all of you today, that you are loved by God, no matter how you're feeling about things, that no matter what happens, you've got that love, and that tether is always with you. So I think tapping into that is the most important thing, and asking for God's help to move through that is critically important. So with that divine support, then we go to something that I've learned to do when I'm anxious is ground yourself. And you can just ask yourself the simple question, am I safe right now? Am I safe? I am safe. Okay, I've got this anxiety, but I'm safe. Am I grateful for anything? Yeah, I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my friends. I'm grateful for my life. Okay, those are real. And so those, I find when you say those, it can make the anxious fears move away. So in my own life at that time, using the example that I was sharing, I hadn't lost my job. I hadn't gotten a disease. I wasn't dying. And I was grateful for a lot of things. So it can be very grounding just to do that reality check. The next step is to face the tiger. And that is facing into your fears, not running away from them. Whatever is kind of haunting you, look at it and just say, I'm afraid. What am I afraid of? It can be, I'm afraid of this because of that, but I'm afraid of something because of this. Just acknowledging it, saying that it is. The more specific you can be about the fear, the better. So the way the lower fear likes to operate is just in generic terms, sort of like everything is falling apart. Our country is going to think, I'm going to die. I'm never going to have a job. It's just wildly thing. Specifically, what are you afraid of specifically? I'm afraid of this conflict in my family. It's destroying our relationship. I'm afraid right now that the killing this last week will lead to reprisals. Those are, I think, logical fears. And then this is the radical step. Take one step toward love. So fear loses its power at the lower level when we act with love. So if you're afraid of a conversation with someone, it's kind of stepping into it. If you're afraid of injustice, commit an action, not just thinking about it or commentating on it, but what you're going to do for justice. You can see in my own story that volunteering and actually doing something completely changed my knowledge of this disease that I was so afraid of. But it also changed the trajectory of my whole life, which I had no idea that it would do. But I can only see that in retrospect, and it changed it for the better. And then finally, the fifth step is to let fear teach you. Fear can be an amazing teacher. Um, I would say in that AIDS crisis that I shared about, the greatest contribution I learned was that through my service, that I could actually help on this issue. And that led me down a whole level of advocacy and moving to Washington and fighting for funding and working on AIDS drugs for Africa and so forth. But it all started with that lesson that I stepped into the fear, and now what can I learn from it? And at that moment we can ask, um, how can we be an instrument of your peace right now, God? What can I do? This last week, I was talking with a friend who is a rabbi, and he was asking me about what was going on. And he knew what was going on with the Utah situation. And on the Utah situation, I joined a call with Equality Utah, the group. It was like 30 people in the call, and they had me on as the trainer, but then they put me on the spot and said, okay, Rich is a minister, so we want to know what the spiritual solution is for this. I'm like, I knew that people in the room did not have a belief in spirituality because I've gotten to know them. So I know they're not going to be interested in the spiritual message. And I really hadn't heard the room. I didn't know what the vibe was. I didn't know. So I'm just being like put on the spot. What's the spiritual stuff? So this is what I came up with. And it relates back to this story from the book of Esther, the rabbi had reminded me about this week. In the book of Esther, there's a story. Esther is a Jewish woman. They're conquered by the Persians. She marries the king of Persia, but he doesn't know she's a Jew. Her her uncle Mordecai finds out there's a plot to kill all the Jews, asks her to step forward and tell her husband to save the Jews and that she's a Jew. And she says, if I do it, she has her fear, right? If I do it, they could kill me. And Mordecai's quote in the story is, you were created for such time as this. Like, this is your destiny, this is your purpose, this is your meaning, regardless of the consequences. And so that's what I said to the Utah group. I said, you've been training on, bridging divides. You've got the skills. Your organization is highly respected in the state. What we're about to go through is going to be pretty horrible because of the gay and the trans angle in the story. They're already targeting the group, people online. And so the group then went around and shared and said, well, I don't agree with Rich, there's a God, and I don't agree that there's spiritual things. This is our moment. Like, we have been training for this. Like, this is why we exist. This is such a moment as this. So I think that also in fear, we can be married up to our moment if we're paying attention. And I believe that's important here for Holy City, because as a community, I think with the teachings that we have, with a very inclusive faith that we have, this house can become a space that really provides dialogue, that builds across division. And yes, this is a tough moment for our politics, no doubt about it. It's a tough time for DC, but I believe we should not give into the lower anxiety fears, but we should see, God, okay, how can we as a community rise up? And when we do, there's a way forward for us that I believe that we can use the fears of this moment to rise up and truly serve God. Amen. So as we do at each week, we're going to open it up for any questions, fears, concerns, thoughts. But as you can tell, it's been a busy week. Sometimes I think I get the sermon topics to help me through the week. Any questions or comments from anybody? And I should say, you shouldn't be afraid.
Yeah.
You grab that.
Yeah. Very helpful. So my question is, if we are though, like, because other people's lower fears are obviously a reality in the world that we have to deal with. And so if our fear is a fear of being targets of their lower fear, or kind of dealing with the reality that lower fears have an impact on us in the world. For example, I mean, not to be too political, but Trump getting on television saying this was the radical left, and he has power, and people like that have power. So like, there's the reality that the lower fears of some can lead to destruction or violence against you. So I wonder, like, how do you deal with that? Is the answer still kind of frame this in the higher fear, respond, and kind of take concrete action, or like, what is your view about that?
Great question. So you're saying if everybody is in lower fears and those lower fears are threatening to you, how do you not get pulled into it essentially? And how do you keep a higher fear? Well, at one level, you have to deal with the reality that people are operating at that fear. And you have to recognize it and you have to say, I'm not participating in it. I'm not going to be putting my hot take out there that this is what happened and kind of I think that would be my opinion. And at the same time, concrete example, again with Utah, Troy Williams, who's the head of the program, is being trolled by a person who's saying that the organization groomed children and this is the product of this group and this group shouldn't be existing. So the answer there is law enforcement. I mean, you can't be naive about it. So you report it, you watch it, you have to be careful. So it's not like a naive, well, I'm just going to take a higher level and I'll be safe. No, but I think that the biggest trick that we can do is we can't control others. We do have to protect ourselves, and but we don't want to participate, I think, in this the lower fear that's been going on for a long time. And people have very clear views. I just know I'm right on this and I want to get it through. And eventually, with people, particularly who have mental health issues, when you get into that, that does lead, the potential for violence is just one step further. So, but that's what I would say. It's not, that's one reason why in the sermon, I was trying to make really clear that you don't want, the message is not, oh, you shouldn't have fear. Fear not. We're going to have fears. Where are we going to operate and how are we going to, but you do have to protect yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it clear?
Yes.
Okay. Good. That's a tough topic, tough question. Anybody else?
Just the inveterate note taker. I had number 3, face your fears, and number 5, let fear teach you. I must have missed number 4.
I'll go over them. So there might be more better ways to say it than I did, but this is what I came with. So ask for God's support is 1.
Right.
Ground yourself in the present, like, am I safe? Just reality. 3 is face the tiger. So step into the fear, face the fear.
Rich, we can't hear you online.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. We moved the mic around. Oh, I was reiterating, people love the sermon so much they want me to preach it again. No, they don't. They're like, no, I just want to know what number 4 was. But I'm just going to reiterate them because hopefully I got them. 1 is you ask for divine help. 2 is you ground yourself in the present reality. 3 is you face the fear. And then number 4 is you take one small step toward love. And the example I used were like, so I volunteered, I did something. I didn't just it wasn't just in my head, but what's a step you could take in that direction that would address that fear? And yeah. And then finally, what's a loving action you take? And then finally, the last one is what's the teaching in this? I think there's a teaching in this.
I just saw a post yesterday or today from Monica Guzman from Braver Angels, who was kind of speaking about this moment that we're dealing with, post the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And she said we should all think from like both sides, like, what are we afraid of losing? So I haven't quite like figured out how to answer that yet, but I just thought it was an interesting question related to what you're speaking about. Like if we all just kind of thought about in this moment that we're in society, with all this, the political violence back and forth, like in terms of how people are acting, like just that question was like, what are we afraid of losing? So just thought I would share that.
That's great. Great question. You haven't come up with your answer yet? It's usually at the lower fear, what we're mainly afraid of is losing control. And the lower fear or anxiety has the illusion that we're in control. And that is really a difference. That is a difference of a spiritual outlook than just maybe a psychological outlook. And I would say most of the people that have asked me for help who are really trapped in deep anxiety, where it's kind of just pulling them down like a spiral, is that they actually believe that they've got to solve it, that they alone can solve it and should solve it, the whole situation, but they can't. So it's just like it's overwhelming. So I think maybe, and I'm there's the Enneagram, which describes personality types, and the number 8 is called the Challenger, which I'm the 8, and the 8 is famous for really wanting to be in control. And really fearing control. And I have that within me. I really do not like, I don't need to be in charge, but I don't like when someone else is, when I feel like I've lost freedom. So I think there's a sense of that right now that people are like, I don't want to be subordinate to this other side. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good question. What am I afraid of? What am I afraid of losing? Yeah, that's a fear. That's a good question. It's great to see you, Kelly. Anybody else? So looks like everybody is thinking about it. So no other questions? Okay, well, we can wrap up then. If you have any questions during the week, just email me. I know that was a lot to think about. I think people are a little overwhelmed in general right now. So thank you everybody for that. And we'll continue our worship. Oh, I'm sorry. I missed the message here. Still just processing, but I thought it was a great sermon. Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot to process. It's definitely a different way of looking at fear than we're usually taught. So yeah, if you have any questions during the week, and I'm finding that, yeah, people are very stressed out right now. So that's one of my roles as a pastor, is that if you need to talk, please just set up a time and we'll find time to talk through. But let's do all we can not to be overwhelmed by these lower fears, and let's see what great lesson. The best lesson for our time could be that this is we could be breaking through to a higher level, and that seems contrary. But as contrary as sort of me doing that AIDS work and then seeing where the AIDS crisis went, but things can go in a different direction. Okay. All right.